stuff. They talked. Joplin said he'd been out of town a few years. His hands shook. Rummy. Joplin's paintings were for shit. Who had he been to tell George Patniks that he was a good painter? George had a better grasp on reality than that. George looked at his own paintings. Cons leaning lonelily against concrete block walls, smoking and looking at nothing. Buildings that looked so tired they might tumble over with a pat on the back from a good wind off Lake Michigan. Kids playing in the park on the merry-go-round, but not looking like they were having fun. George knew he had the eye, but he didn't have the magic, wasn't there. No avoiding the truth, no use crying. George could paint. He could paint what he saw, but he was never going to be anything but a summer exhibitor looking for a Park District ribbon. That was fine with George. No kicks. Life was good. Work once every couple of weeks, make the good score, sometimes big cash in the back of a drawer inside a pair of socks, sometimes a good sale to one of the pawn shops on Devon or Milwaukee that fenced on the back and down side. You get caught once in a now and then, that was the price. You took it straight up. It was usually bad luck that got you. At least it had been bad luck that got George each time he had been caught. A really good silent alarm connected to a security service, neighbors when there shouldn't have been, a small green-stoned necklace hidden under the floorboard of his apartment and lucked on by an overeager detective on his first case. But George was older now. A lot older. He had learned from his mistakes. He never talked about his jobs. He cased each one far beyond what any pro might consider reasonable. He'd get the book hard and heavy and not across his knuckles the next time he stood before a judge with decent evidence on the table. George had to be careful. He pulled out his wallet and extracted the sheet of paper on which he had written a phone number. Then he dialed the number. It rang 4 times. Music in the background. Classical. George recognized it but couldn't give a name. "Good evening," the woman said softly. "Mr. Harvey Rozier?" George said, disguising his voice by going an octave higher and a bit slower and more precise than his normal. "Or Mrs. Rozier?" "The concert is about to begin," the woman said. "Very important," George insisted. "Mr. Rozier won't want to miss this call." "One moment," the woman said, and George found himself listening to the faint music again. Not his kind. George had a quiet collection of CDs, for him alone, torchy stuff, definitely off-limits to his mother, stuff to paint by, Dinah Washington, Linda Ronstadt, Liza Minnelli. Some things just don't. "Yes," came a voice over the phone, almost whispering. "It's me," George said, his voice still disguised. "You asked me to call you at 10. I'm calling you." "Who is this?" "Bert Chambers from the Tool and Die," said George. "I don't know what the hell—" "Look, Mr. Dozier, I'm just doing what—" "Dozier?" "Are you Carl Dozier?" asked George. "Harvey Rozier," the man said with exasperation that George thought was fully justified. Look," said George, "is this or isn't this 312-1111? "No," said Rozier, looking at the number on the phone. "It is not." "I'm sorry," George said with a sigh. "I'm having a bad day." Rozier hung up. So did George. He had watched the Rozier house for 3 weeks, every night, looking for a house in Saginaw Park with signs of money, a wall or tall trees, and no dogs or alarms. The Rozier house, a red brick that looked a little like a castle, stood at the end of a cul-de-sac and down a drive. George had had his handyman card ready when he approached the house the first time, right after the mailman left. George had been ready to whip the card out in case he had overlooked a maid, a pool man, a relative. He'd driven right to the front door and rung the bell. No answer, but George was just setting up, taking no chances. Nice place. Big. He went for the mail, found out he was at the home of Harvey and Dana Rozier. George returned to the street every few days and nights, but never to the cul-de-sac. It wasn't the only house he checked out. He had 6 others on the line, in suburbs as far north as Highland Park and as far south as Morgan Park.